Okay, so you're here with us on the deep dive because, well, I imagine you're a hypnosis practitioner, right? And I'm guessing you're always looking for those ways to really refine your skills.
Yeah, to get those really incredible results
Right.
with your clients,
Hmm.
but in a way that feels, totally natural for them, right? Not like, okay, here's the script, here's the induction.
Exactly. It's about going deeper than those traditional techniques, right?
It is. And today we're actually going to take you behind the scenes like you're shadowing an expert. But not by just talking about it, like actually listening in on a real session.
So we're doing a deep dive into advanced conversational hypnosis. And this is
Yeah.
not theory. This is the real deal.
It is. So what we're going to uncover here is how this incredible trainer, Virginie, she uses these really interesting open-ended questions,
Yeah.
you know, and we're going to see how those questions actually help her clients go into trance and have these like huge breakthroughs.
And for context, the client in this session, they came in feeling kind of stuck professionally, like they couldn't express themselves freely. They felt like they didn't have anything unique to say, like they were kind of minimizing their own experiences and ability.
Oh yeah, classic case of imposter syndrome probably.
Right. So let's jump into the session and see how it all begins.
So right off the bat, Virginie's approach is super interesting. She starts off with these simple open-ended questions like, what brings you here today? What would you like to explore? And what's so cool about this is, well, it gives the client total control, right?
Yeah, it's like an invitation.
Exactly. Instead of leading them somewhere specific, she's letting them guide the conversation. And that's how, even without any formal hypnotic induction, the client's focus starts shifting inward.
And I noticed that the client immediately grabs onto that opening, and starts elaborating on that feeling of not having anything new to say. They even mention all the content that's already out there online and question if they even have a right to add to it.
Oh, for sure, they're stuck in that comparison trap, right? And that self-doubt. They keep minimizing their own experiences, their skills, all the things they could potentially contribute. And, as hypnosis practitioners, this is something we see all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Those limiting beliefs, they're like invisible walls. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The client then contrasts this block they have around self-expression with their public speaking as a trainer. They say that in that setting, they feel totally comfortable, even though it's not their own material they're presenting.
So it's not a general fear of public speaking then, is it?
Right. It seems more about expressing their own personal thoughts and feelings, putting themselves out there.
Absolutely. Because when they're in that trainer role, there's a structure, a safety net.
Mm.
But sharing their own unique perspective, that feels way more vulnerable.
Makes total sense. And then they also voice this concern, about adding to the noise that's already out there. They're like, everyone's sharing their opinion online. Does mine even matter? It's
Yeah.
a very relatable fear, especially these days.
Oh, for sure. And it really underscores that deep-seated feeling they have, that sense of not being original enough or valuable enough to contribute. So Virginie has really skillfully created this space, where the client feels safe to open up. They've laid out their issue. And now Virginie's going to start digging deeper.
Right. So how does she move beyond the surface, to get to the heart of what really matters to the client?
Okay, so now she uses another brilliant open-ended question, and it's this. And why is it important for you today, to you? Why are these subjects important to you? Now, this is genius because it shifts the focus from the problem to the motivation behind solving it.
Right. It's like, why do you even care about this?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that taps into a much deeper level of desire. You see, for those of us who work with conversational hypnosis, connecting with this inner motivation, it's gold.
So what does the client say? What's their motivation?
So they share this desire to move into personal coaching. They mention their experience with energy work and say they'd love to talk about things like femininity, family stuff, how they see life's challenges, and personal will. And see, these topics, they're much more personal, much less structured than the technical training they're doing now.
It's like they're starting to connect with their true self.
Totally. And Virginie, she doesn't let up. She asks another open-ended question. And why is it important to you to support people from a personal point of view? See, she's encouraging the client to really articulate that why, that deeper reason for wanting to help others. And you know what? These kinds of questions, they're so powerful because they guide the client inward. They get them searching for answers within themselves.
And that's how trance happens, right? Naturally, organically.
Exactly. And the client's answer, it's so beautiful. They talk about this lifelong thread of wanting to help others. They want to share the solutions they found, offer different perspectives, and they even talk about this fascination with the human experience, like why people make certain choices, the impact of those life-changing encounters.
It's like their whole life has been pointing them in this direction.
It really does feel that way. And there's this deep empathy that shines through, and you start to see the unique value they have to offer, the wisdom they've gained from their own struggles.
And they even talk about being a positive impulse for others. It's such a beautiful intention.
It is. So we've moved from the block to these core desires, and now Virginie, she's going to address those limiting beliefs head on, the fears that are holding the client back.
Right, because everyone has those. Right, no matter how driven they are.
Oh, for sure. And she does this by asking, and what are the stakes or the stake if you didn't share your message on social media? So she's prompting the client to really think about what they might lose, what could happen if they stay silent.
So what does the client say? What are they most afraid of?
So their biggest fear, it comes out, is not being just and potentially even being a negative influence on others. And this takes us right back to that feeling of not having enough value, especially compared to like trained psychologists. It seems like that comparison is a major hurdle for them.
Oh, yeah, that feeling of not being qualified enough. It's so common. And it's interesting that Virginie addresses this head on, right?
She does. She asks this very direct but still open question. When you talk about added value, compared to whom? So she's forcing them to really confront who they're measuring themselves against.
Right. It's about bringing that unconscious comparison to the surface.
Exactly. And of course, the client, they mentioned psychologists, with their fancy degrees and all that training, they feel like their own intuition and experiences just don't measure up.
The good old not good enough story. We've all been there, haven't we?
Oh, for sure. But then Virginie, she throws in this brilliant question that shifts the whole conversation. She's like, and can you just remind me, what does a psychology degree have to do with an impulse? That spark of inspiration or encouragement.
It's like she's separating the act of helping from the credentials.
Totally. And initially, the client, they struggle with this, right? They think maybe a diploma helps you choose your words better, but then they realize, no, it doesn't guarantee that you can inspire someone. It's a huge moment of realization.
Yeah, it's like their belief system is starting to crack open.
And then, to really drive the point home, Virginie uses the client's own words against them.
Yeah.
She says, and let me ask you this, because you said earlier that several pivotal people had given you an impulse. Did these people have a psychology degree?
Oh, wow. She's calling them out, but gently.
Exactly. And the client realizes, hey, these people who really impacted them, they didn't have any special degrees. It was about their attitude, their support, being there at the right time. Just basic human kindness,
And that realization, it must be so liberating.
Totally.
Yeah.
And to really make sure it sinks in, Virginie asks, and now that you've realized this, how do you feel about feeling legitimate, let's say, to give this impulse to others? She's helping the client integrate this new understanding, see themselves as worthy.
And what does the client say? Do they feel more legitimate?
They do. They realize that it's not about choosing whether you're influential or not. It's about just being yourself, showing up authentically. It's such a powerful shift.
So, okay, we've tackled the qualification issue.
Yeah.
Now the conversation moves towards judgment, right? That fear of being authentic in a public space.
Yeah. Virginie, she approaches it really subtly. She's like, if it's not chosen, how do others choose? So she's encouraging the client to think beyond those qualifications and see that connection can happen in so many different ways.
And what does the client come up with? What reasons do they give?
Oh, a whole bunch. They mentioned reputation, diplomas, interestingly, the specific words someone uses, their vision, even being provocative sometimes. It shows that influence is so multifaceted.
Right. It's not just about one thing.
Exactly. And then Virginie, she brings it back to the client's inner world, their self-confidence. She says, we come back to the point where it's a lack of self-confidence, concretely, since it's ultimately not a question of what do you think you're missing. So she's putting the focus back on them.
And what do they identify as missing?
After a pause, they say, oser. It means daring. So they finally admit that what's holding them back is the courage to actually share their voice, regardless of what others might think.
That's a big realization. And of course, Virginie dives deeper into that word, right?
She does. She asks, what does that mean to you? And the client, they define it as moving forward no matter what others think, staying true to their beliefs.
So it's about internal alignment.
Yes. And then they talk about this fear of judgment, They say in their personal life, they don't care what people think, but when it comes to expressing themselves publicly, it's a whole other story.
And Virginie digs deeper into that distinction, doesn't she?
She asks, what's the difference between the private sphere where you don't care and the public sphere where it's more complicated? So she's asking them to really articulate those fears.
So what are they afraid of specifically?
Okay, so they're afraid of not genuinely helping, of adding to all the noise out there. They want to make a real difference, not just promote themselves.
What's a noble intention?
It is. So now we see this tension. They desperately want to help, but they're terrified of not being good enough or being judged.
So how does Virginie help them bridge that gap?
Okay, so now she focuses on connecting their intention to their actions. She says, and what makes you think you've already started practicing? So she's reminding them that they're already helping others in their current roles, building their confidence.
And the client, they do give examples, right?
Yeah, they talk about giving support and insights during their energy work and even during their training sessions. So they're already living out that desire to help. They just don't realize it.
And then Virginie, she asks about the feedback they've received.
Yes, she wants to highlight the positive impact they're already having.
And what kind of feedback have they gotten?
Well, it's mixed. Some people are super grateful, some say nothing. And this makes the client realize that impact isn't always black and white. It's subtle sometimes.
Makes sense. And then Virginie goes even deeper, doesn't she, into their personal motivation.
She asks, and what I would really like is, what does it give you to help people? So she's shifting the focus inward to the personal rewards they get from helping others.
That's such a beautiful question.
And the client, they describe feeling joy, enrichment, learning, connection, like they're being their true selves.
So powerful. And now the conversation takes a turn towards objectives, doesn't it?
It does. After the client talks about shifting their focus from fear to their why, Virginie asks, how do you decide where to place your focus? And this simple question, it triggers a huge realization for the client. They realize they have no concrete goal. Like for this whole shift towards personal coaching and sharing their voice, they've never actually defined what they want to achieve. And that lack of clarity, well, it's keeping them stuck.
It's like they're wandering around without a map.
Exactly. And Virginie, to confirm, she's like, and had you already realized that you didn't have a goal? And the client, they admit that they hadn't.
It's amazing how simply naming the problem can be so freeing.
It is. And then they start talking about different creative outlets. They mention sound therapy, writing, and they even have all these unpublished writings.
Oh, they're a writer too.
Yeah. But they feel scattered, like they can't bring all their interests together.
So how do they move from this scattered feeling to having a goal?
Well, Virginie, she asks this awesome question. And what's stopping you from having a goal while being scattered? Like, who says you can't have both?
And what does the client realize?
They realize that they're self-sabotaging. They could easily set a small goal, like dedicate a few hours a week to writing, but they're stopping themselves.
And then they mention all their unpublished writings, right?
They do? Notebooks full of them. And then comes the classic question. When is the right time?
Oh, I know that question all too well. And what does Virginie say?
She says, never. Just like that. Straight up. No sugarcoating.
Wow, that's direct.
It is, but it's also super effective. It cuts through the procrastination and forces the client to face the truth.
So what's stopping them then, if it's not about the right time?
Perfectionism. They admit they're a perfectionist, and that's a huge barrier.
Makes sense. But they also mention that their creative process is very spontaneous, right? So there's this tension between spontaneity and having a goal.
Totally. They love the flow. They don't want to force it. But that's making it hard for them to actually share their work.
Right. It's like they're stuck in the creation phase.
And now the conversation shifts to the actual act of sharing, particularly audio. And this brings up a whole new level of vulnerability for the client.
What are they afraid of when it comes to audio?
First, they're worried about the technical quality, like making sure the recording sounds good. But then they say something really powerful. They feel like their voice is very intimate. It's like being naked, they say.
That's so vulnerable.
It is. And Virginie, brilliantly, she connects this feeling back to authenticity. Yeah. She asks, knowing that what's important to you is authenticity, how is that a problem?
So she's making them see the link between the two.
Exactly. And the client, they struggle with it, Sharing their voice with people they know feels okay, But putting it out there for the whole world to hear, that feels terrifying.
It's like that unseen audience amplifies the fear.
Oh, for sure. And then they talk about their fear of negative feedback, you know. They're afraid of hate, of being attacked, hurt.
That's understandable, especially online.
Totally. And Virginie, she reframes it a bit. She says, what you're afraid of, or what represents a danger, isn't especially what you don't see. It's rather, so she's guiding them to see that the real danger, the thing they're afraid of, is visible negative feedback.
It's about tangible criticism.
Exactly. And the client, they get it. And then they talk about how other people cope with online negativity, blocking, ignoring, getting used to it.
But the client also mentions that they become more resilient over time, right?
They have. They've learned to deal with challenges.
Mhm.
And they also mention their faith, which gives them a lot of strength. They feel supported, not alone.
And Virginie picks up on that, right?
She does. She asks, when you think about that support, what's stopping you from daring? So she's reminding them of their inner resources.
What do they say?
At first, they're like, nothing, actually. But then they dig deeper and admit that they're afraid of doing it wrong, of misrepresenting the message they're trying to share.
This seems to be connected to that inspired writing they talked about earlier.
It is. They talk about how sometimes it feels like the writing just flows through them, like they're channeling something, and they're terrified of messing it up,
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. And Virginie, she asks some really interesting questions to clarify this fear. She's like, what about, could you please explain what being right has to do with being a crazy person, with the risk of being one, and then, what's your problem? Is it whether you perceive correctly or whether you transcribe? So she's really getting them to think about the process.
So what's the client's main concern?
Being accurate. They're afraid of not being a clear channel,
Yeah.
of altering the message somehow.
But they've been working on this, haven't they?
They have. They talk about actively trying to clarify their channel through self-awareness and questioning their own filters. And they say it's actually working. The messages are getting clearer.
That's great progress.
It is. But they're still hesitant. They'd rather stay silent than risk being inauthentic.
That's a tough position to be in.
It is. But then they have this amazing realization. They realize that their dedication to being a clear channel actually makes it less likely that they'll mess things up. It's like their commitment to purity is a safeguard.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. And now, Virginie, she goes straight to the heart of the matter. She asks, how do you feel about daring now? And be honest, tell me the truth.
So she's asking for a straight-up assessment.
She is. And the client, their whole energy has changed. They say they feel much more joyful at the idea of daring. They feel warm, challenged in a good way.
It's like a weight has been lifted.
Totally. And remember how they were stuck on not having a concrete goal? Well, now they realize that the objective is to let what comes come and to transmit it as authentically as possible.
Wow, that's a beautiful realization.
It is. And they say they feel ready, even without a ton of experience. They know they'll learn as they go. And the fact that others are already doing something similar, well, it doesn't matter anymore. They're like, this is me. This is my unique expression.
That's so powerful. And even the fear of being it's not so scary anymore, right?
Fading. They even say they feel warmth in their throat chakra, like there's a physical release happening.
It's incredible how quickly things can shift when you address the underlying belief.
It is. And the session ends with the client feeling a surge of energy and impulsive action. They're ready to move forward.
That's amazing. And that feeling of vulnerability around sharing their voice, is it still there?
It's lessened, they're not as scared of feeling exposed. And even the potential for negative feedback, it's not such a big deal anymore. They even feel empathy for those who might criticize them, like they understand that negativity comes from a place of pain.
That's a really mature perspective.
It is. And they end the session feeling safe, ready to embrace their calling.
Wow, what a journey. So for our listeners, especially the hypnosis practitioners out there, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think the biggest one is the power of open-ended questions. You see, Virginie, she didn't use any fancy techniques or inductions. She just has really good questions. And those questions, they guided the client inward, helped them uncover their own blocks and find their own solutions.
It was truly client-centered.
It was. It wasn't about telling the client what to do or think. It was about helping them access their own wisdom. And the trance, the breakthroughs, they all happen naturally, organically.
It's so different from the traditional approach to hypnosis.
It is. And it shows that profound change can happen through conversation, through gentle inquiry. So for you listening, think about how you can incorporate more open-ended questions into your practice. Really listen to your clients, let their answers guide your next question, and see where that takes them.
It might just lead to some incredible breakthroughs, so that's something to ponder, isn't it? How can you be more curious, more open in your sessions? How can you help your clients unlock their own potential through the simple act of asking the right questions? That's the challenge and the beauty